Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Rundown. I will be your host today, Craig DeLuz, coming at you from the West Coast, the left coast, behind the Iron Curtain, otherwise known as the Sierras. And, well, today is Throat Punch Thursday.
Uh-oh. Mike. What day is it, Mike?
It's hump day.
Hump day!
It's hump day.
Hump day!
That's right, everybody. Today's not hump day. What was I thinking? I gave you the wrong information. Today's not hump day. Today's Thursday. And you know what day Thursday is.
Guess what day it is? Guess what day it is? Who's ready?
It's Throat Punch Thursday, bitch.
That's right. It's Throat Punch Thursday. And unfortunately, Mike is not going to be with us today. See, that's what normally keeps me on track with this stuff. These last couple of weeks during election season have just been going so crazy wild. I just lose track of my days. So you're going to have to all forgive me. Please forgive me. Anyway, we're here. We're having a good time. And I'm glad that you are here joining us as we talk about the news of the day. We're going to have a good time talking about it as well. So let's start it off the way that we usually do. And then you know how that is. We start off by, giving a quick shout out to our sponsors. We're going to start with the folks over at Hitman Industries. They make rifle and pistol caliber barrels available for you to purchase at any length. All you have to do is go to hitmanindustries.net. That's hitmanindustries.net. Then we've got the California Republican Assembly working to help elect conservatives at all levels of government, from school board all the way up to President of the United States. Check them out at cragop.org, as Ronald Reagan once referred to them as the conscience of the Republican Party. Once again, find out more about why at cragop.org. Then we've got the best in concealed carry tactical holsters available on the market at hogholsters.com. That's HAWG holsters.com, because they like helping Americans wear guns. They like it so much they want to give you a discount. All you have to do is use the discount code The Rundown. All caps, no spaces, one word, just like it is right up there. And you're going to get your hog holster on discount today. And then finally, we have the place where you can find all things tactical except the gun. That's right. They have pants, they have shirts, they have jackets, they have hats, they have optics, they have, you name it. If it's tactical, if it's outdoor, if it's indoor, trust me, they have it. They have all things tactical except the gun. They have great prices, huge selection, great customer service. Find out today at uscombatgear.com, the place where you can find all things tactical except the gun. Also want to remind you, if you haven't already done so, please take a moment and check out the 2A newsletter. You will find it at 2anews.us. That's 2anews.us. If you like getting 2A news, you can get it delivered directly to your inbox on the daily, Monday through Friday. All you have to do is go to 2anews.us, hit the subscribe here button, put in your email address, and you will get your news in your inbox. It is literally that simple. Also want to remind you, if you are watching this program during the 3 o'clock hour on the West Coast and the 6 o'clock hour on the East Coast, you are watching us live. If you are watching us live, that means that we are taking your comments. That's right. We're taking your comments here. We would love to hear what you have to say, what you think about the program, what you think about me, what you think about my thoughts. And quite frankly, it doesn't really matter to me whether or not you agree with me or not. In fact, it's better if you disagree because, well, when you disagree, it gives us the opportunity to, mock you.
Oh, wow. Is that a mockingbird?
Man, is that a mockingbird? Is that a mockingbird?
That's right. As Mike would say, we will mock you. All right, moving right along. Let's start with the big news of the day. FBI thwarts ISIS-inspired plot. That's right. There was an ISIS-inspired plot to bomb the New York Capitol. Here's the story from NBC News.
We're following breaking news. A woman has been charged with planning a terror attack on the New York State Capitol building in Albany. Federal prosecutors say the woman was inspired by ISIS. NBC News national law enforcement and intelligence correspondent Tom Winter joins us now. What more are we learning about the suspect here in this foiled plot?
Yeah, Joe, the suspect has been identified by the FBI as Jessica Bowie. She's 35 years old. She's from the Albany area, and she is expected to be in court literally as we're speaking here. This investigation happened happened pretty quickly over the last couple of months. They started to detect her posting on social media all sorts of support, and we'll get to these photos in just a second because they're a part of this plot. Started posting support for ISIS, other terrorism groups, praising the 9/11 attacks. Then she starts to make some oaths to ISIS, and that's something that law enforcement really pays attention to because that can be a real indicator that somebody's about to conduct an attack. Through the use of several human sources and through several informants, the FBI talks to her, clear that she wants to bomb the Capitol in Albany in the name of ISIS. She says that afterwards she would want to flee to Syria. She understood, again, all according to the charging documents, that people could be killed as a result of this. She even goes, and that's what those photos were referencing there, to Home Depot to purchase a number of items for that. And that big container you see there in the shopping cart, those are nails that they would use as shrapnel. And her concern was whether or not they would be big enough. That's some of the information they say they derived in the course of this investigation.
No doubt some of the key evidence there. I know we just heard from the governor, Kathy Hochul. She put out a statement. What's she saying about all this?
Yeah, so the governor pointed out and praised, first off, the efforts of the FBI as well as the New York State Police to conduct this investigation. Also talked about how the fact, and we've seen this, you and I have talked about it on a number of occasions, Joe, the threats to public officials and to politicians. And in light of that, she pointed to the fact that there has been an increase in security at the Capitol. Part of the evidence that's included in these charging documents is that actually it was some of the cameras at the Capitol that saw her on at least 5 different occasions conducting operational planning, basically taking photographs and figure out where this bomb that would be delivered in that DoorDash bag that we saw before, where that could be delivered and what she would see at the Capitol. She was under surveillance the entire time. The FBI was in communication with her, so this wasn't going to get out of hand, but obviously a significant plot here.
All right, Tom Winter covering this breaking news for us. Tom, thank you so much.
All right, so just so you know, once again, here's the story right over here being reported by NBC News. Now, according to the report, let's see, moving down here, it says, according to the complaint, it says Bowie converted to Islam 5 years ago, was radicalized online and created several social media accounts using an horrific Islamic name. An honorific? Okay, an honorific Islamic name. She appeared to have created multiple accounts because they were, quote, frequently suspended by providers for violating their terms of use, the complaint said. Several accounts allegedly traced back to Bowie posted messages expressing support for terrorism between May and July. Bowie swore her allegiance to ISIS in multiple audio recordings in English and Arabic, and once wrote, "Praise be to Allah for September 11." Special agent in charge of the FBI Albany field office, Craig Chimaroli, said in a news conference Thursday. The complaint alleges that Bowie communicated between July 16 and August 17th with confidential source who was working with the FBI and posing as an ISIS facilitator. Now, a couple of things that I want to point out. I want you to be real notable here. This is not somebody who immigrated to the United States. This is someone who's born here in the United States. This was someone who was radicalized here in the United States. And by the way, when you say radicalized, it's not like they just accidentally started watching stuff. They are watching stuff online that is designed to radicalize people, that is designed specifically to take weak-minded people or people who already have oughts and already are interested in conducting violence, who already are angry at the man or the system. And it creates an environment where they can be both inspired, motivated, however you want to call it, as well as prepared, provided the information needed and necessary in order to engage in violence. So when someone says, well, they're really not communicating, no, they're communicating with every single person that they can. That is part of their plan. That's part of their plot. That's part of the shtick. That's what they're doing. Anyway, now, mind you, what's the difference between this person and a guy, for example, like Hassan Piker, who has praised terrorists, who roots for terrorists, who roots for American soldiers being killed, who has said that America deserved 9/11. That's who this guy is. That's who Hassan Piker is. He praised that American military personnel get hurt and harmed. That's what he does. But the main difference is that number one, he doesn't engage in direct individuals. He doesn't single people out with his threats, right? That's number one. The other thing that he doesn't do is that as far as we know, or at least he has not been caught in the midst of planning a specific attack. In this particular case, you're dealing with somebody who not only has praised terrorism, praised terrorists, but has also engaged in plotting a terrorist act. Whether it was the purchases that she's made, whether it was the going and the surveillance that she's engaged in, all of these various different things. The other thing, by the way, to note is that I don't see a picture of this person specifically. Let me pull the article back up over here. I'm looking and I don't see a picture of her. If her last name is Bowie, I'm gonna guess that she doesn't look like your typical Islamic terrorist. Last name Bowie, probably a liberal white woman. Not saying, just saying, but probably a liberal white woman. Or just, how about this? How about just a liberal woman? I use liberal white woman only because that seems to be the people who seem to be the most susceptible to this, at least in terms of what we've seen publicly. I could be wrong. I could wholly be wrong, but not saying, just saying. Anyway, but this is important stuff to see. This is important stuff to know, because keep in mind that as much as we focus on the Islamic threat to Israel, keep in mind that Israel is the little Satan. The U.S. is the great Satan in their eyes. And this is not all Muslims, right? Once again, we've talked about this. There are plenty, and I feel comfortable saying I don't know how many Muslims are here in the United States, but I'm sure there are plenty of Muslims here in the United States who wish no ill will, who just wish to live here in peace alongside their Christian and Jewish and Muslim and agnostic brothers and sisters. But there are also plenty of those individuals who are not just Muslim, but they are Islamicists. They are jihadists. They are people who believe in some of the fundamental, more radical teachings of Islam, which is about killing the infidel. If you do not convert, you must die. And they do not believe that Israel has a right to exist. And they would just as soon do whatever they could to take out the United States or convert all of the United States. Either one of the two would probably work just fine for them. But that is their mission in life. And I'm not saying that they're all Muslims. I'm not saying that they're most Muslims. I'm saying that there are enough of them, in particular here in the United States, for us to be not concerned, for us to be vigilant. How about that? For us to be vigilant. And I think in this particular case, you can see why. Because I will just say this, as is the case with many religions, converts generally tend to be the most fanatical. Not saying, just saying. Yes, I am. I'm saying, yes, they do tend to be the most radical, which means in this particular case, they generally tend to fall more in line with the specific teachings and quite frankly, can potentially pose a risk to our way of life. And if you are someone who has a good, solid understanding of the Quran and believe that I am wrong, I welcome for you to comment. I welcome for you to reach out because I would love to learn more. But my understanding of the Quran, my understanding is that a lot, if not many of its teachings are directly in contrast or contrary to what we believe. Because much of what we believe here in the United States is based on Judeo-Christian principles. We don't believe in a theocracy, right? We have a greater respect for the rights of women. We do not believe that women are property. There's many more beliefs that we have that are just inconsistent with our way of life and the values we have, not just as Christians or as a Judeo-Christian society, but as a Western society. And that may be one of the reasons why, it's one of the reasons why so many of these terrorists, they call it the Red Green Alliance, have lined up with the radical left, because they too want to see Western society fall. Now, they want to do it in the name of communism. The Islamicists want to do it in the name of Allah. Now, what I believe is basically going on here is that the communists believe this, the soft-headed socialists believe that, well, once we get rid of Western society or white supremacy, then, the Muslims, they'll come over to our side. They'll see that free love and all of that is okay. I believe that the Islamicists are thinking, well, once we get rid of Western society, with that is going to then go some of these soft-headed socialists who are part of the new new Marxism or the neo-Marxism, the social or cultural Marxism, because they're going to basically say, yeah, now all of a sudden LGBTQIA plus is not going to be a thing here anymore, and then throwing them off the roof will commence. That's what I believe is going to happen. But anyway, that's all something that we all need to be conscious of. All something that we need to be wary of is any sort of extremism, whether Christian extremism, because there are some people who have manipulated the Christian faith in order to make people believe, well, it's a whites only thing, or to believe that at one point people want to believe that, well, or there are people out there who've started violent groups with the idea of quote unquote because they believe God told them to. I think they're wrong. I think that what makes our country great is that we live in a society where we can disagree and still live together under the same banner of protection of the same government. Now, we should be able to do that. But that only works under Judeo-Christian principles and values. It doesn't work. It doesn't work under Islam. It just doesn't. Well, our government wasn't based on that, wasn't founded on that. And I know some folks out there are going to disagree because, you're either soft-headed, ignorant, or you're part of that group that wants to get rid of the rest of us. In any case, let's move right along. Evidence the jury never saw in the Carmelo Anthony trial. Now, you may, and it's been released. Now, you may remember this. This is the young man who wound up killing another teenager at a track meet in Texas last spring. The Carmelo Anthony, it was a rainy day. Carmelo Anthony was under the tent of another team. They asked him to leave. He refused. They told him to leave. They refused. One of the individuals confronted him, pushed him, and he reached into his bag, grabbed a knife, and stabbed the other young man in the chest. Well, there are a lot of people out there, and there's tons of protests where they're out there demanding a new trial. That he was convicted. He was convicted and sentenced to 35 years. Many of his own people who were there testifying on his behalf basically said that Anthony was the aggressor. Well, now the judge who was part of the original trial has been replaced. He was replaced because he said that he believed that the case was rightly decided. I don't know why that would be cause to remove the judge, but he said he believed that the case was rightly decided. In any case, now they're looking to get a retrial. They're looking to get a retrial because they believe that the case was not handled fairly. I don't know why it wasn't handled fairly, but they're saying it wasn't handled fairly. Well, now the prosecutor is basically saying, well, wait a minute. Not only was it handled fairly, but there was a bunch of stuff, a bunch of information that was never released to the public. That, well, since we're talking about how the case was handled, let's talk about and take a look at some of that evidence. And that's what we have reporting here over at the New York Post. It says, Carmelo Anthony's ex-girlfriend reported that he was stalking her hours before he stabbed Austin Metcalf, and he had threatening and violent texts on his phone, the prosecutor revealed at Anthony's appeal hearing Thursday. The jury never heard about Anthony's disturbing history or about Metcalf's juvenile criminal record because of a gentleman's agreement in the 19-year-old's defense ahead of his trial. Collin County Assistant District Attorney Bill Weirsyke revealed. He told the court Anthony's high school girlfriend confided in an assistant principal on April 2nd, 2025, that Anthony was stalking her after a breakup and that he was obsessed with fights, guns, and knives, according to local outlets at the hearing. Anthony also sent a picture of the knife and told his ex-girlfriend, "I'm low-key on the verge." Wersk said he was spiraling, the prosecutor said. There's a picture of the knife he wound up sending. It says here, a few hours later, Anthony stabbed Metcalf to death under the tent at a track meet at a high school. In exchange for prosecutors not using that evidence in court, the defense lawyers agreed not to bring up victim Metcalf's juvenile criminal history, which included graffiti that included vile racist stuff. I offered the agreement, Wersk said, according to WFAA TV. Let's stay away from historical character and stick with the facts. What happened under the tent? The agreement was meant to keep publicly fraught trial from being an even more volatile racial tinderbox, he said. Anthony was convicted of murder and sentenced to 35 years in prison, but he is appealing the conviction. In a legal victory for Anthony, the judge who presided over his trial was removed from the appeal on Wednesday. Retired district court judge Michael Chitty was then assigned to consider the motion from Anthony's attorneys asking for a retrial. Anthony's attorneys had asked for Judge John Roach to be removed, in part because of a TV interview in which Roach said jurors got right when they delivered the guilty verdict. In his opening statement at the retrial hearing, defense attorney Russell Wilson claimed Roach ran a shadow docket, WFAA TV reported. He argued that the June proceedings were marred by strict courtroom rules and improper jury instructions. Anthony's team has said his decision not to testify came after a dispute with prosecutors over an agreement to focus on the trial and the events leading up to the stabbing. So in other words, I guess they're trying to say he was coerced into not testifying on his own behalf. But the reality is that if he had testified, he would have had to answer questions about those messages, about the fact that he was stalking his ex-girlfriend, the fact that on one of them he said he's on the verge. Now, here's the thing that may be interesting. Now, if he says he's on the verge, does that mean that he was planning on hurting somebody? Does that mean that he had the knife because he was planning on stabbing somebody? Is that enough for murder one, or is that more murder two? I don't know. I'm not a legal attorney. I don't know enough to know. That may be what they're arguing. They may be saying, he was angry. He was upset. But is it murder one or is it murder two? And do you think if he got murder two, he would have got less than 35 years? Who knows? In any case, it's very clear. Dude got a fair trial. There's no doubt. People want to say, oh, well, he had an all-white jury. He did not have an all-white jury. There was not a black member of the jury, but the jury was very diverse. I don't remember exactly what the makeup was, but I do remember there were several other races and several other genders on there other than just white people. Now, the left will argue, well, their proximity to whiteness, blah, 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 blah. Well, my point is you don't get to say it was an all-white jury if it was not an all-white jury. You just don't get, well, I guess you can say it, but you'd be lying. Or at the very most, you'd be lying. At the very least, you'd be wrong. How about that? In any case, let it be known, dude was cruising for a bruising. He was angling for a fight before he ever walked into that tent. The fact is that I don't know if going under that tent was him and looking for a fight, or if the resulting argument was him looking for the fight. Either way, he was the aggressor in this particular case. And I'm not saying that Austin Metcalf wasn't aggressive, but in this particular case, Clearly, the amount of force that was used by Carmelo Anthony was not appropriate for him to, even if he felt threatened, the amount of force that he decided to use was not commensurate or was not an appropriate use of force, an appropriate amount of force that he used. And anyway, I will be very surprised if this judge grants a retrial. That would be very disturbing if that were the case, if they were to in fact grant that to be the case. I'm believing that it will not. Anyway, moving right along, a good piece of news in the Second Amendment community. Federal judge strikes down Biden-era ghost gun rule. This being reported by the folks over there at Truth About Guns. Says here, gun ban advocates lose again as federal judge strikes down Biden gun ghost rule. A federal judge in Texas has struck down Biden-era ghost gun rule, also known as frame and receiver rule, leaving gun ban advocates reeling after yet another devastating court loss. On August 18th, U.S. District Judge Reed O'Connor of the Northern District of Texas, Fort Worth Division, ruled the frame and receiver rule unconstitutional on two separate grounds. It violates the Second Amendment, and it is too vague to satisfy the Fifth Amendment due process protections. The Second Amendment Foundation, a plaintiff in the case, Defense Distributed versus Blanchett, announced the victory in a Facebook post proclaiming yet another win over unconstitutional gun laws. The court declared the rule unconstitutional as applied to all SAF members and issued a permanent injunction protecting Defense Distributed and current and future Second Amendment Foundation members as it related to the specific gun kits involved in the case. SAF said in the report, in plain language, SAF members are now expressly protected from enforcement of this rule, specifically involving these specific products under the court order. Now, here's the deal. Right now, this court order only really affects people who are party to the case. So that would be, as was noted there, SAF members or any other organization or Defense Distributor or any other organization. So, well, let me put it this way. Now the question is going to be, is the entire rule, or at least is the entire thing going to be thrown out? Who knows? Is the Department of Justice going to appeal it? I'm going to guess that they are. And here's the reason why. Not because they want to get rid of ghost guns, not because they want to get rid of home-built firearms, but because right now it's a precedent, but it's literally only applies to the people involved in the case. If it goes to the appellate level and then it gets thrown out there, which it will, if it doesn't get thrown out there, it'll definitely get thrown out at the Supreme Court level, then it's precedent. Now, all of a sudden, there is a decision that impacts more than just the people who are involved in the case. That's important to note, because I know there are a lot of people out there, people who, some don't like Trump, some don't like the government at all anyway, who are going to say, well, if they appeal it, well, they're appealing it because they're anti-gun. No, in some cases, they may just be appealing it because if they don't, it doesn't really, the decision isn't really at a point where it can actually serve as a precedent. And I know that's legal speak and court speak, but it's a real thing. It is honestly a real thing, and it is a real thing to consider when deciding whether or not to appeal something, right? We need someone who's in a position where they can say, hey, you know what? This is going to apply to everybody. And it would have been nice if the judge had tried to make it apply to everybody. But, on the other hand, we've also got the Trump administration arguing on cases relating to immigration or on other cases where lower court justices are making decisions and trying to set a national precedent. That's already been ruled. No, you don't get to do that. So that's where this is going to start to become interesting, because gun rights folks are going to get mad when they appeal. when the Department of Justice appeals. They are. But you got to understand, I'm trying to explain to you why they are appealing. And they're appealing so that they can get this very same decision at a higher level. And trust me, whatever defense they put up ain't going to be a very strong one. Trust me. It's not going to be a strong, but they want a precedent here. Because in a lot of these cases, let me be honest with you, they'll come back if anti-gunners take over Congress, both houses of Congress, and get the White House. They'll work to try and pass these laws. They'll get rid of the filibuster, and they'll try to pass these laws. And then it'll become law, as opposed to what they're trying to do. What they tried to do here was pass it via statute, or not statute, but pass it via regulation, which is basically an executive function. And as you know from Schoolhouse Rock, the executive branch doesn't write law. At least they're not supposed to. It seems to be a thing nowadays. It seems to be happening. Anyway, more to come on this very important decision. And now another one. This is something, I don't know how many times I've talked about this on interviews that I've done, how many commentaries I've written on this. But as many of you know, I also do a lot of writing. Well, one of the things I talk a lot about is the minimum wage. I talk about how setting price floors, in particular for labor, well, I talk about how bad those things are and the real harm that it causes, right? Well, there is a new study out, and by the way, this is not the first study in this, but there's a new study out that demonstrates that who does minimum wage actually wind up hurting? As reported by the Washington Free Beacon, minimum wage hurts poor workers, new study finds. Quote, the job loss is concentrated among poor families, the paper says. And this is a UC Irvine professor, so definitely no conservative think tank. A new study by academic economists conclude that higher minimum wages hurt low-income workers by reducing their hours, the chance that they remain employed, and their overall income. The working paper, Do Minimum Wages Help Workers in Poor and Low-Income Families, was released this month via the National Bureau of Economic Research by David Newmark, who is Distinguished Professor of Economics at the University of California, Irvine, and Emma Wall at UC Irvine Economics, a UC Irvine Economics PhD. The paper comes as Democratic and Socialist political candidates press a federal minimum wage increase, a central policy initiative in the 2026 midterm election campaign. Senator Bernie Sanders, the Vermont socialist, greeted the victory of Abdul El Sayed in the Michigan Democratic primary with a video. Quote, what Abdul's victory means, what we've got to do is raise the federal minimum wage to a living wage, at least $20 an hour, maybe higher. The Democratic U.S. Senate candidate in Texas, James Tallarico, lists, quote, raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour at the very top of his priorities in the labor and business category. The Democratic U.S. Senate candidate to Maine, Troy Jackson, has been publicly plumbing for an increased federal minimum wage since 2014 during the Obama administration. The Democratic U.S. Senate candidate in Iowa, Josh Turek, is campaigning on the promise of legislation to raise the federal minimum wage and index it to inflation. Now, so in other words, what they're saying is these Democratic candidates, these are all Democratic candidates running for federal office, running for Congress, right? Senate and House, who are committing to implement a policy that studies, and I feel comfortable saying studies because this is just the most recent. This isn't the first study that demonstrates that the people who lose are low-income workers. How do they lose? Well, think about this. Labor is one of the cost factors that go into producing a product, good, or service, right? It goes into running your business. If the cost of labor goes up, that has to be absorbed. Now, in some cases, they lose profit margin. right? So they'll decrease some of they'll lose some profits. But that's not the only place that they lose it. In some cases, they try to reduce, in some cases, they increase the cost of their product, right? That's one of the other things that they do. We've seen the cost of fast food in the state of California go through the roof. I remember when you could buy a whole meal, a whole bacon ultimate cheeseburger is one of my favorite fast food meals, right? I remember when you could buy the entire thing for $7, the meal, the fries, and the drink. Just the burger is almost $10 now here in the state of California. Costs go up, but that's not the only place. They then look to cut labor costs in other places. What do? They lay people off. What do they also do? They reduce workers' hours. What do they also do? They reduce workers' benefits. Once you go from being a full-time employee to a part-time employee, meaning once you are now working under 40 hours a week, they're not obligated to provide you health insurance or health coverage. So you have people losing their health coverage. You have people, so they're losing income, some cases losing their jobs, losing their health coverage. And oh, by the way, the people who utilize the products, goods, and services provided by those on minimum wage, do you know who most of those folks are? Do you know who most of those folks who can least afford to have their costs go up? You're right. It's minimum wage, low-income workers. So you're increasing the prices on the very people you're claiming to increase their wages. And even though you're really not increasing their take-home income, you're increasing their cost of living. See, those are the unintended consequences of this policy. But it sounds real good. Increase the minimum wage to give them a living wage that they can't afford to live on. That's what they do. That's what happens here. There's a reason why you don't want to listen to a Bernie Sanders on anything like this. He has never, ever, 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 ever had a real job. I'm really clever. I can't say never, never, ever. I just don't believe I don't know that he's ever had a real job. He's been living off the government teat for as long as I can remember. It's real easy when you are living off the government to be a socialist. You want bigger government because that means more money for you. How do I know that? Well, the dude owns several $1 million homes. The socialist. Yeah. He's part of the oligarchy. The very oligarchy that he keeps telling you to be against. Yeah, no, he's part of it. Because see, the oligarchy isn't just about the uber wealthy. It's also about the leaders and the policymakers. And guess what? He's been one of them for his almost his entire adult life. That's been Bernie Sanders. And yet he wants to tell you and me how to live our lives. He wants to tell you and me what's best. He doesn't know how to make money. He doesn't know how to to me, redistributing wealth means we're going to distribute. It's going to be distributed to the people who work hard, who come up with innovative ideas and apply those things. And with a little bit of luck, they're gonna do well for themselves. A little bit of taking some risk, being successful, sometimes not. Then wealth is then naturally redistributed. But he wants the government to do the redistributing. He wants to take from those who've earned to give to those who haven't. And oh, by the way, the government gets their piece. You know they got to get their piece of the pie before they pass it on to those who haven't. And by the way, they're passing it on not to the needy, but to those who they can buy off. That's who winds up getting that little extra. Anyway, moving right along. We're now moving on to our parting shots. Parting shots are brought to you by Hog Holsters. Just go to hogholsters.com. Use the discount code The Rundown, all caps, no spaces, one word, and get your Hog Holster today. Today's party shots are also going to be brought to you by the Babylon Bee, which is fake news that you can trust. Our first one here, you may have heard about this, the woman who's dealing with postpartum psychosis, or at least she's claiming postpartum psychosis in the death, in the murder of, or the killing of her 3 children. It says here, Lindsay Clancy honored with Planned Parenthood Lifetime Achievement Award. That is kind of a gruesome joke, but, well, that's who Planned Parenthood is. And it's sad and it is a little gross and grim, but it's appropriate for Planned Parenthood nonetheless. It says here, DeSantis explains to Newsom secret to counting ballots in one night is not committing fraud. Yeah, that's right. Well, the difference, though, Mr. Governor DeSantis, is, you guys show up to the polls and vote. They have in California, they have us almost all mailing in our ballots. And if we're going to check the signatures, which I'm still not convinced that we really do all that well, at least, then it's going to take a while. That's right. Anyway. Liberal white women stand weeping outside court trying Jack the Ripper. Well, if you do not believe that this is possible, just check out the Louis Mangione trial. And then finally, America descends into mourning upon news that Harry and Meghan are leaving. I'll just say this. Bye, Felicia. That's how I feel. That's how I feel about y'all. Bye, Felicia. Don't let the doorknob hit. Don't let the doorknob hit you when the good Lord split you, as my friends would say. All right, folks. That brings us to the end of our program. But before we go, we're going to give one more quick shout out to our sponsors. We got Hitman Industries, makers of rifle and pistol caliber barrels, available for you to purchase at any length at hitmanindustries.net. The California Republican Assembly, conscience of the Republican Party. Learn more at cragop.org. Then there's Hog Holsters, the best concealed carry holsters on the market at HAWGholsters.com. That's hogholsters.com, helping Americans wear guns. And then finally, the place where you can find all things tactical except the gun. That would be at uscombatgear.com. All right, folks, that's going to be it for today's program. We very much appreciate you tuning in. We appreciate you liking and sharing the program and encouraging your friends to do the same. We will be back, tomorrow. That's right. Tomorrow is Free for All Friday. Till then, y'all have fun. Stay safe. We will see you mañana.